Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Swedenborgian online community's Thursday interview and discussion. We are quite blessed to have you here and amazingly blessed to have our guest this evening, Reverend Sage Cole, the Harvard Swedenborgian chaplain and the minister to the Swedenborg Chapel in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and also once minister of this community, and my peer mentor, Reverend Sage Cole. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here.
Well, we are quite excited to have you here in connection with us. And also, I want to welcome those of you in the Chatsy right now. Greetings, folks. It's nice to be connected with you in communication tonight. And, you know, ask any questions that you have for the Reverend, and I'll share them with her, or even memories of your connections with her. How are you doing tonight, Reverend Sage?
I'm great. For those of you who don't know, I have 2 small children, so my life is very busy, and I sometimes fall asleep at 7:45. So I'm slightly tired, but other than that, I'm really glad to be here. And as you mentioned, I was the first minister of this community long ago, and it's really cool to see how things have changed and grown. Because when I started out, we didn't have any of these live conversations. So this is very cool. It's cool to be a part of it.
That's right. The very first. It's amazing. It's amazing to have you here. I have to hear more about that initial ministry. You know, what really happened there and how it started. But you know, before we get into that, thanks again for being in connection with us. Yeah, you have some kids, and you fall asleep pretty early nowadays.
Yes, well, when I can, but yes, it's a lot to juggle full-time ministry and family and mothering and all of that. But it's a good lot. It's a good thing to be busy with.
Yeah, it's quite the blessing of busyness.
Yes, exactly.
Well, you know, we won't hold it against you if you doze a little bit in this conversation. We'll make do.
You'll wake me up? Okay, good.
Well, no, you know, we're all about self-care here, so we'll speak very softly once.
Oh, very good. Excellent. No, this is very cool. I'm really glad to be connecting with you, Cory, and I've actually been working all day with Reverend Anna Woofenden, who many of you probably know, who's been working with us here in Cambridge as our ministry consultant for outreach and new initiatives. And it's been just a wonderful day because she's been working with us just for this year, started in January, and now here we are at December. So we've been reflecting on all the things we've done over the year and the progress we've made. And it's quite something to stop at those milestones and see where you've been and where you've gotten to. So my heart is very full as I come to this conversation.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's beautiful. Yeah, we recently had Reverend Anna on the show.
That's right. Just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, quite the amazing person and spirit. Yeah. And so, yeah, a year with Reverend Anna, and you've been with the Swedenborg Chapel for a couple years now. And you also have some wonderful news, I hear, in regards to the chapel. Is that right?
Yeah, yes. Things have been going really, we've been making a lot of progress this year. This is actually, I'm starting my 4th year at the chapel. I started in 2015. Wow. And for the first few years, I was half-time and really spending a lot of time with them, just assessing where they were. You know, it's a small congregation, historic congregation in this urban setting. And when they called me there wasn't really a clear sense of where they were headed. And so those first 3 years were really a time of getting to know one another and learning about the environment, getting acclimated to Harvard, where, as you mentioned, I serve as the Swedenborgian chaplain at Harvard. And then after those 3 years, we really decided it was time to start to figure out where we were at and where we were going, and synchronicity and Providence all worked together to make it possible for Anna to come and work with us, really to specifically help with some of that discernment. So we received a grant to hire her just for 2018. So She's been with us since January and helping the congregation, helping me get clear on what's possible. And it's just amazing the things we've accomplished. We were looking at the list of goals we had for 2018, and there were like 33 on the page, and I think we've done every single one of them except for 3, and the 3 that we hadn't finished are like in process. So
really,
yeah, it's really amazing the way God. I often say I feel like the stream of Providence is like a fire hose right now at the chapel. It's just thrusting forward, and some of the things that have developed is this real new kind of vision and mission to expand our ministry there, and specifically to open up our space. You know, we have this beautiful chapel that is just, I mean, it's gorgeous. If you've never visited, you need to visit, and it's very sacred space right in the heart of Harvard Square. You know, we're right across from Memorial Hall on the Harvard campus, right in this bustling neighborhood. We get all this foot traffic, all of these people walking around. We're across the street from William James Hall, which, if you know your Swedenborgian history, you know, William James' dad was a devout Swedenborgian, and so William James was influenced by our tradition. And then right next to the chapel is the Harvard School of Design, which is originally the School of Architecture, which was founded by Herbert Langford Warren, who was the original architect of our chapel and a member of the original congregation.
Oh, really?
So we just have a lot of history there, you know, a lot of ties, and we're just wanting to really reach out more. And the kind of the vision that's been coming, and that's part of this fire hose of divine providence, to devote our reading room and our library, which is in our chapel space, and is a huge part of our mission, to share the writings of Swedenborg and the theology, but to devote that reading room not to Swedenborg himself, but to a devotee of Swedenborg who is world famous, and who graduated right across the street in 1903 from Radcliffe College at Sanders Theater, the beloved and adored and wise and wonderful Helen Keller. And this idea of devoting the library to her has just taken on a lot of energy and excitement, of the ways in which we can use her example and her legacy of not only having her spiritual eyes opened and being such a so moved and changed by Swedenborg's vision, but also this worker for justice, this worker, you know, this woman who was really ahead of her time and a lot of her political thinking, and really so devoted to useful action in the world, and also like intensely spiritual in the way in which our tradition isn't just about kind of studying what Swedenborg said, but living it. And I feel just I get goosebumps when I think about it, and I feel like Helen is like my spirit angel or something. She's like adding to the energy of this excitement, and a big part of this is going to probably be a big building effort. And I mean, we have a lot of work ahead of us to get to the place of really being able to hold this vision, but God is just bringing all the things. I don't have any fear that it will not manifest, because it feels very alive and real.
Yeah, you feel that, the providence there.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations on the funding.
Thank you.
There.
Thank you. Yes, and then specifically we got this funding, exactly, we got this grant from the union, $60,000 or so, specifically to do the initial work to figure out what we would need to do to become handicapped accessible, to basically rebuild the auxiliary building that's attached to the chapel that was built in the 60s, so that it could house this library, and then also just be a better, more useful space to support the ministry that happens in the chapel, and then also to be useful in the community at large for other events and activities. So the next 6 months of 2019, a lot will be revealed about what we can do there.
Well, great. That's super exciting. And I know how excited you are in general about that ministry and how it's been going, and connection with the community. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that journey? You've been with them for 4 years and started off part-time, and it sounds like things are really going beautifully, and I'm sure we're all interested. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's been picking up steam, but it's definitely been an effort. It's hard for communities to embrace change, and it's definitely hard to think about taking on new endeavors, new projects. Sadly, I think because, in some ways it's because we're such a small tradition, and sometimes we feel like we don't want to think too big because there's sort of that fear of failure or loss or losing what we have, or any number of things. I also think hell is a real thing. I think hell is sometimes after us and holding people and communities back from trying new things, or even not just trying new things, but just seeing all of the blessings that we have. So a lot of what I've been doing there is to just help us to see and appreciate the incredible resources that we have of being in this place and having this beautiful church, and how important it is for us to be good stewards of that place, and to think of how the Lord would wish for this amazing place to be of use, not just to the handful of people that are currently worshiping there and name it as their church, but to the larger world. And so I think that's been a big focus. And so, we're trying things. Some things work, some things don't, but we're trying things, and I think we really want to take some bigger risks because we just see how we have these assets, but to make them useful, we need to invest in them, I guess, if that makes sense. Invest in them and really put our energy into them, and not just let them fall into disrepair, because sometimes that's a real fear for these beautiful big old churches is it does require a lot of resources to keep them. And anyway, so it's been a journey, but a lot of people are coming to the table. We confirmed 3 new members earlier this year, and of course 2 of them are architects. So, part of it is building. So the Lord provides some of that. One of our other new members actually found the church through the internet, which is very cool. She first started watching those Off the Left Eye videos from the foundation, and then she was driving by our chapel and saw the name Swedenborg and thought she would come by. So it's cool the way people are still being drawn, from these diverse streams of connection and communication. So I'm feeling very hopeful for the future in the way people are still really attracted to what our tradition stands for. And then in particular for my setting, this chapel, it really has a spiritual energy around it. I meet a lot of people in the community who maybe aren't a part of the church, but walk by our wildflowers and are just like, that's an important part of their day, is coming by the chapel and experiencing its beauty and the flowers that are growing in the garden, or it's really is integral, and I think it's doing ministry just by existing in some ways, and which is another reason we want to continue to care for it. One of our other initiatives that will be happening in the spring is we're going to be building a labyrinth outside of the chapel, which will be another great way for us to offer kind of a spiritual tool to our neighbors, to people in our community who maybe they're not ready to walk into the chapel, but maybe they can still have a way of connecting with themselves, with God, on our grounds. And we're really excited about that. It's going to be a very cool project.
And what a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll put an image of a labyrinth on every one of our web pages so people can trace it with their finger for spiritual practice.
Well, and actually part of what, the finger labyrinth is actually great. It's what I want to have. We're going to build the physical labyrinth, but then we want to have like a sign, a plaque next to it. And we hope to have a finger labyrinth that's a replica of the actual labyrinth, so that people who are sight impaired can follow the labyrinth, or people who maybe are in a wheelchair who can't go through the labyrinth, but they could still have that experience with their hands. Because we really want to emphasize accessibility. That's one of the things we're really working on, is how to make the space accessible to all types of people.
Yeah, it's something to focus on. In the past, society hasn't been as aware of that kind of thing, so it's nice that you're thinking about that and planning to serve in that way.
I hope so. I think it's really, the more I've been learning about accessibility in churches, it's really kind of a travesty when when the acts were passed in Congress to require accessibility for public buildings. Churches actually lobbied to not have to do that because of their fears of having to spend too much money to do, which certainly on some level we can understand that. I mean, these are historic old buildings and it's not easy to make them handicap accessible. So I can certainly understand that argument, but it really is also created this history now of quite a few decades where many churches have become not safe places for people with a disability. And what kind of message are we sending the world? It's just kind of all the places that you would think should be safe, you would think it would be a church, and welcoming. That's the thing we seek to be, is welcoming to all people. And yet, for a lot of people with disabilities, they just assume that churches are going to be a place where they're not welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really been weighing on me as this has kind of settled in more and more, how that's a reality for our space, and it has been. And there's certainly many reasons for that. It's not that anyone is necessarily to blame. It's just it's sad. So I'm excited about the possibility of righting that wrong, and then not only righting it, but hopefully kind of trying to go above and beyond to serve diverse populations of people. It's my dream.
That's quite a dream. Excellent, Reverend.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Very insightful, and something we should all remember as we build community in our different ways and different settings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to take a moment to kind of direct our focus a little bit to the chat. See, we have a few people here saying hi to you, Reverend.
Okay, hello.
Hello, yeah. Albert says hi, and he says, small children like yours remind him of innocence according to Swedenborgian doctrine.
You should meet my kids, Albert. I don't know if you'd agree. There's trouble. I was going to say small children to me remind me. Swedenborg also says that we are all born little hells because of our selfishness, and we have to overcome that. So, yes, in the sweetest moments, my children, when they're sleeping, they are pure innocence. They're pure beauty, But I also find raising kids to see how they teach me a lot about the will and the ego and how important it is for us to overcome our selfishness, because their selfishness is very out there for you to see with all the things they want and demand. So.
Yeah, I haven't come across the hell comment, but we're reading through Heaven and Hell in one of our book series, and we were laughing. We were laughing in the book series because he does say, we're kind of oriented pretty selfishly as children on this planet, at least, and that although there is a connection to heaven and innocence as a child, it's kind of more surface innocence. It doesn't really land in their mind. They're not very rational yet.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Well, I have so many questions for you, so I don't know where to start. So we'll just have to have you on, again.
I'll come back. Sure. No problem.
Great.
No problem.
But I'm curious about your journey in Swedenborgianism, and also like your ministerial journey, because you're the first minister of this community. So I want to hear more about that. Yeah.
Well, let's see. Should I start with the? Let's see. I don't know where to start. So my
the beginning. How did you find?
I'll give you the beginning. Well, let's see. As many as people probably know, my mother is a Swedenborgian minister, Susanna Curry, and she found the church when I was a teenager. So I was about 12 or so when she started going to the church in Portland, Maine. And not long after that, she entered seminary. And anyway, that was a long journey for her because she was also a mom and a working mother. But I started going to the teen retreats and getting kind of more involved, and over time learning a lot more about the church. When I'm kind of along, I don't know, everybody when they're 18 and 19 and 20 are like searching, and I was in that process of searching, and ended up going to Urbana University in Ohio when my mother was ordained, because back then children of clergy were allowed to go to Urbana without paying tuition, which was a wonderful bonus.
Because they were connected to the Swedenborg
Yes,
church,
they were connected back then. I don't think it's true anymore. But yeah, I just and when I was in Urbana, I was studying religion and philosophy and psychology, and started doing some reading. They had a little it probably still exists, but in the basement of the Urbana library was a Swedenborg room. And so there was a little room with all of his writings and a lot of collateral literature. And I started spending time down there. I took a correspondence class, actually, from the Swedenborgian School of Religion with Ted Klein. So started learning more, and just it all started making more, like before my connections to the church were all about people. And then I really started delving more into the theology in connection to the things I was learning in class about other religions. And it was always just sort of amazing to me how much I felt like the theology I was learning almost better explained kind of the human condition than the things I was learning in psychology class or whatever. And it just, and honestly, I think the turn that happened when I decided to go towards religion instead of kind of in a more secular direction of psychology, because I think ultimately I was always interested in kind of why we are who we are, and like what makes human beings tick, and like how to be human, I guess, was maybe the question I was asking. But I tried to bring some of my Swedenborgian thinking into my psychology classes, and particularly some of like what Wilson Van Dusen says about how the spiritual world works, and you know, he brings psychology and spirituality together. And I brought it to one of my psychology professors, and she thought I was totally insane and wanted me to leave immediately. She was like,
"Oh wow!"
She wasn't willing to go there. She was not willing to think in those terms, and that's probably one of the reasons I'm a minister today, because I just felt like, yes, I could continue to be in this field of psychology and like try to bring in religion like when it's possible, or I could just be in the field of religion, and I can be my full self. And that was when I really shifted gears to studying religion. And then I decided to go to seminary. It was kind of the very next step with seminary. And
fantastic.
After, I
felt the call.
And I had no idea that I wanted to be a minister or anything. Like, I didn't know what it was to be even a clergy person in a church, because I really didn't grow up in a church. I just knew that I wanted to help people. I knew that I wanted to learn about God and how to be human and how to love and all of that stuff. And I think I wanted to help others experience the joy and release that I experienced when I started to like believe that there was more going on than what I could see. You know, that shift for me that happened really in my early 20s, really believing like, oh, it's not all up to me. Like, there's something else going on here. That was huge. And I think that really saved my life. And I wanted to help other people see that and believe that. So I knew I wanted
That's
to do
powerful.
all of that. I didn't know what it meant to wear a robe and serve communion and wear funny clothes, and I didn't know any of that stuff. What a traditional church did, but
I don't do any of that.
Yeah, you don't have to do it. Well, pretty soon you're going to do that stuff up in Canada.
Yeah, so it's quite a trip, kind of, feeling that amazing call, and then of course having, to do it.
Well, exactly, and now here we are, 12 years later. I was ordained, or 13 years later. I was ordained in 2005. So I went to seminary. I got ordained, and now I've had all those experiences of working in churches and wearing the funny robe and doing all of the things. And even though it wasn't something I had expectations for because I didn't know about it before I got into this business, I've learned how to fill that role by being in community with others who do understand that language. And in some ways I feel like I've appreciated liturgy in church and all of the pieces maybe more than some people do who maybe have baggage about it, because it wasn't something I was experienced with. So I didn't really have any baggage because it was all new. So I fell in love with all of it. I just felt like it was this new language I was learning about how to express faith, So I've loved being a minister, and I've loved being in traditional parishes. I've served in several traditional parishes. I've been able to serve in more untraditional situations, and
what was it
I've
like
loved
that
all
first year? You've loved it. That's wonderful. Did you come into the online community right after school, or was that
I did
a bit into your
pretty
journey?
Close.
Okay.
No, it was pretty close. Yeah, I graduated from seminary and decided to stay in the Bay Area. Got a CPE residency. So that first year I was doing clinical pastoral education at California Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco, and I don't think I got the online job right away. I think it was maybe after 6 months or so the call opened, and so I took that on while I was doing CPE. It was a part-time job, and it was great. I was excited about it. It sort of was somewhat compatible with the work I was doing at CPE, and I continued with that job for some time. I did it for 6 months while I was in San Francisco, and then after that I received a call to serve at the Wilmington Church in Delaware, where I was working as an assistant to Randy Lockhouse. So that was also a half-time job. This is the other thing about ministry, is it's often all these half-time, third-time, quarter-time, 7-8 jobs, and you have to add them all up so that they equal one. So I had the half-time job with Randy and then the half-time online ministry, and I did that for a year. So I think I did it for about a year and a half. It wasn't a long time, in part because I think I was just starting out in ministry, and there were once I got to Wilmington, I did it, and then I ended up leaving to devote more time to the Wilmington ministry, because that was starting to kind of grow and take more of my attention. But it was pretty cool to be there at the beginning, and it was all new, and we didn't really know what we were doing. But it was where I got some of my sea legs with what it was to be a minister was in the internet. And I still have all those little sermons that I wrote for the online ministry. It was some of the first preaching that I did, and it was sermons that were never spoken because this was early on in the journey, so everything was digital. Everything was chatting and publishing and stuff like that.
Fascinating.
But it was cool. Yeah, and there were some people I connected to while I was doing that ministry that I got to meet in person later, and really got to see that what I was doing really had made an impact on them, and that was really special to me. It was sometimes challenging to know what kind of impact I was having, because it wasn't like I was in a room with people who were shaking my hand after church and saying, "Good sermon, Pastor." But I realized after the fact that, especially for people who were kind of isolated from a church, that there were a lot of people where that ministry was really important to them. And I'm sure that continues to be the case for a lot of the people who are on Chapti right now. And I think that's really cool, the way that this has been able to draw people together and give people some grounding who might not have another Swedenborgian for 100 miles from wherever they are. Cool.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear, and how nice that you were able to connect with people in person later and hear that you made, an impact.
That was cool.
Yeah, it's nice to have the chats, because then it's nice to have communication with each other and hear from each other, and the feedback, it's very clear and direct, and also like emails, of course. But yeah, sometimes you feel a little bit removed because you're not really sure, who's listening. And unfortunately with our system, I don't even know much about, our podcast's reach. The YouTube thing's kind of new, but it is nice when you do connect with people and you hear like how touching like Reverend Wilma's ministry has been for them, and that there really is a beautiful community here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I was at the beginning of my ministry when I did this work, and I remember making the choice to leave because I was getting more involved in an in-person community and really feeling drawn to that. Like that was what I needed. That was the next step for me in my work, and feeling some of that lack. Like I want feedback. I need to know who's listening to me, and I need to know what they think. And yet I think I've realized the longer I'm in ministry, even if they're in the room, you don't always know. Even if they're sitting right in the pew, you don't necessarily know if they're listening or what the impact is. Like people aren't always going to share that with you. So it's just a reality of being in ministry. Is sometimes you just have to preach it, and you just have to speak, and you just have to hope that God is working, because you don't always get to know the impact that you're having in the world, and it's just part of the gig.
Yeah, that's life, right?
Yeah,
it is a call for us to maybe come up with better feedback forms and things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how great! And so eventually, I guess so. You were with this ministry for just 1.5 years, and that kind of.
Yeah.
And I was actually curious about something you said earlier about your time in CPE at the medical center. You were visiting patients and families. What was that like for you?
That was a great year for me. I really enjoyed CPE, and it actually was great training. I didn't realize at the time, but I ended up later in the past becoming a hospice chaplain, in large part because I had gotten that experience at the hospital earlier. But CPE is an interesting bag of tricks, because it's a job in a hospital, so a lot of it is visiting patients and doing that kind of one-on-one work. But then it's also this intense reflection experience where you're working with other ministers in training, and you're doing these sessions where you're having to share kind of how you've worked with people, and you do these didactics, and you get all of this feedback, and sometimes it's critical and hard, and it's like therapy and work, like all mixed up in one. So it was a pretty transformative year for me, very much so. And
I can relate. My time in clinical pastoral education was similar.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny. I think and honestly, I chose to do it, but it wasn't really my first, it was partly life circumstances that made me do that residency. Sometimes, I don't know, maybe other people can relate. Like sometimes God calls, and it's like you get the call and you go, and it's free and it's clear and it's right. And other times in life, there's life circumstances, and you have to look at, what your family needs or the people around you, and then also see what possibilities there are or things to do, and then you choose. And I chose that residency for more reasons than just my call, just what I wanted. And I think ultimately it was exactly right. I think sometimes that's how God plays, how it gets played out is it's that mix of life circumstances and the realities that are present, and then this like calling on your heart. So it was an intense year. It set me up perfectly for things that have unfolded since, but I wouldn't say it was fun. It wasn't, it wasn't like the joy of my heart or like, it set me up for future enjoyment, and helped me to get more clear on kind of who I am and what I have to offer the world. But
yeah,
it wasn't always easy.
No, yeah. It was so powerful, the experience, though, the developmental
work. And
yeah, right.
Yeah. So, in all your years of ministry,
mm-hmm.
would you say there are some, deep realizations that you've had along the way that you can share, or reflections that you've had
mm-hmm.
about,
mm-hmm.
just getting by maybe, or helping people connect, or what have you?
Sure. Deep realizations.
About God and community. It's beautiful to hear about your kind of awareness of Providence right now. It's nice.
Yeah. I think Providence, as I sort of shared at the beginning, that has been like my initial conversion to faith, my deep conversion to believing in God and believing was really grounded in Providence, this belief that I'm not making my life, like that God has created me and is creating everything and giving me giving me everything that I need to then choose, and I that really, I don't know, as like a perfectionist kind of maximizing control freak of some sort growing up, that was huge because I put a lot of pressure on myself to try to like make the right choice and figure things out and do it the right way and don't mess up, and to instead believe it's not about like me creating it and always picking the right thing and going the right way, but that, okay, here we are and God is here and here are the things available to us and God is calling at me, like that, to believe in that call, to believe that we are each being guided to be more loving and like given opportunities to do that, to respond to that love. I think that was like my initial conversion. It's probably the sermon I always preach. Sometimes they say all ministers have like one sermon, and that might be mine. And this year I definitely have been feeling that call like even more. It's become more articulate. So I think that's something I really strongly believe, that God is speaking to us all, through all kinds of means, whether that's it's speaking through correspondences, speaking through insight, intuition, other people, the word, every possible means, and that we just need to listen.
No matter our tradition, right?
No matter our tradition, no matter our, no matter, and that one, I guess my other sermon is like that God is speaking to all of us with all of our diverse beauty, and that is a part of it, like that if we are hearing things differently than our neighbor, like that's even more important to be spoken, like that we need all of these sort of diverse ways of seeing and hearing, and that's like fleshing out the truth even more than just kind of regurgitating the way somebody heard God speak, 500 years ago and going by that, but to listen to the new promptings that God has for us. I really feel like that to me is central to the new church. I think in some ways we haven't even quite caught up to the message of the new church yet. Swedenborg told us it was descending way back in the 1700s, and it was just getting started. I think it's just getting started, and we're just starting to catch on to this. She's making room for this new thing, and part of receiving the new thing isn't always we're just regurgitating what Swedenborg said, but we ourselves opening up our thinking and our minds, our hearts to understand the word, to see what it means for the word to be opened, to receive this new revelation that is coming into being. So I think believing in providence, believing that providence is flowing into all of us, and that we all have a responsibility to express how we are receiving it, and that's when the Holy City will come into the world, is when we are all receiving it. That excites me.
Yeah, that's really exciting. It's beautiful. I love what you said about uplifting God's love and love in other people as part of the heart of your call, and what a call that is, right? It's something we can all aspire to, no matter what our day job is. It's kind of beautiful, that kind of ministry where that's at the heart of it. Preaching or what have you is only ancillary, or whatever the word is, to promoting love and that kind of internal health in people, because that's the true ministry, right? And we can each do that.
Exactly. And that's where the work is really happening, and that's where the church is. I think Swedenborg would agree with that. That's what the church is, where the love is entering in, and where the word is opening up, and that is happening everywhere, and probably more often than inside churches buildings, because there's more space where people are outside than in church buildings. It's happening all the time. I think church buildings are just a place to remember that. Churches' jobs and ministers' jobs are just to remind people that that's happening, so that they can go off and do it. It's not that we only do holy things inside churches. We're just places to go and be reminded of what's happening.
Well, that's a good point. And probably part of the reason why in the book of Revelation it says there is no temple, no church buildings there, because the Lamb is their temple, that God is just around, right?
Everywhere. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, that reminder is as ministry. What's that?
Well, and I would circle back to all this I've been sharing about what's happening at Swedenborg Chapel is this is firmly what I believe, and so it's interesting. It's a paradox. It's a mix of things and challenges to then be serving of this building, this historic chapel that is meant to be this beacon of this tradition, when it's a tradition that really is proclaiming that you can be holy and you can be, church anywhere. So, because sometimes when we proclaim that, it's well, why should I come into the chapel? What are you offering me there? What's the point? And I think that we're really holding that truth and saying, okay, no, you don't have to come here to be spiritual. You don't have to come here to be connected to God. And we need those reminders, and we need those connection points, and we need to be together. Spirituality does need to be a communal act. So I think what I'm really excited about is just expanding the ways in which the chapel can be that reminder and that beacon for people. That not everybody is going to find an hour worship service on a Sunday morning the connection point for them, but they might find a group of people that gather and walk the labyrinth the connection point, or they might find a discussion group the connection point, or maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's coming and working with a spiritual director at this place, or maybe it's just walking through the wildflower garden. I don't know, but really recognizing that we are doing ministry when we're gathering and reminding people in all kinds of different ways, and there's not just one way to be a church.
Yeah, and and there is besides, all the new ways, and I love how you're exploring like the different ways you can serve your community. It's just nice to have a space, where people can be in community. It's nice to have that, despite how so many things have changed. Albert mentions Harvard Square really is a magnet for people from all around the world, he says. So the building program is well placed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's just it. We have such an incredible community of people coming by all the time. And anytime anybody walks in or visits, there was like, I've always been meaning to come in here, and I just never have. I've always been curious. Everyone, when they visit us, is, just moved to be there. Grateful to have it in the community. But we haven't always done the best job of having like ways for them to connect and to feel like this is their place too. And that's what we want to help people feel, is like this can be their church, even if they choose to only connect in this way.
That's great.
So, yeah, we're excited. It is a very vibrant community. We did a little stop motion video of people walking by for this grant proposal that we just put in, so it was like only out there for 2 hours or something, and it was this time-lapse video, and I don't know, like 98 people that just walked right in front of the chapel, because it's just such a busy area. So we're excited to see ways that we're going to expand our impact in the coming years.
Well, that's a great, vision for creating community in diverse ways, allowing people, to keep their diversity, right, and find something that works for them. And Paige says something that I think relates. She likes hearing about, the grant for handicap access for the church, and she's learning there's so much involved in being accessible, physical, also signage and different language, time to open, and that really relates to you all in such a busy area.
Huge, and all of that stuff is a part of it. We need to, it's all a part of the 5-year plan, but definitely we want to improve our signs, and that, I think that's just it, is letting people know what you are and who you are, and how you can hook in, how you can jump, how you can be a part. It's very easy for people to feel like that's not my place. And I think maybe that's true for a lot of people in a lot of churches. Like, church does feel sort of other until you step over that threshold. So we just want to make it easier for people to step over that threshold and feel like they belong here.
That's so nice.
We'll see what the Lord has in store.
Well, it sounds like Paige has some, history with this. She says that she got aware of the access issue when they looked at racial welcoming status for her Methodist church, and there were so many little important changes they needed to make. And I think other churches and maybe people like Paige are, I'm sure, the type of people and connections that you'll learn from.
Pick up the work others have done.
Yes,
right?
We're definitely not the only ones thinking about these things. Definitely, yeah. Yes, no, I feel like there's so much to learn from other people and other groups that have done this work. And Paige, if you have any advice for me, please get in touch with me one-on-one. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're definitely building our network and seeking expertise in this, because I definitely don't have all of it. We have a couple architects on the job, but we sort of need everybody, all hands on deck. That's what we're hoping for.
Well, yeah, I'll share a screenshot if everyone's willing in the chat, see of some of the comments being made, because there's nice insights and reflections there that I don't think we'll get to all of them tonight.
Wonderful. Great. That'd be great.
And yeah, so you're my peer mentor, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so what's that like, being in connection in this kind of mentorship role as a minister? I'm sure you've had a peer mentor, probably do now, I should know, right? So what's that been like for you?
Well, it's certainly kind of cool starting to imagine that I'm like that I could be a mentor. Like, it kind of blows my mind that I've been ordained for 13 years. I mean, I feel like in a lot of circles I still am like the young one. Eventually that's going to change, but it's nice. It was actually when Anna and I were working today, we were talking about all the things we were grateful, and I said, I'm grateful that I'm older. I'm grateful for getting older. And I do feel like I'm grateful for being further along this path. Like, I definitely feel like I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now any earlier than I'm doing it. You know, like, I have the gift now to do the work that I'm doing. And so, yeah, I love that I'm at a place where I have something to offer someone like you, Cory. I also serve on the committee on admission to ministry, so I get to work with students who are on the path to ordination. And I think I'd always thought I wanted to work on that committee, but I wasn't really ready until now. Now I think I have something to offer those students and something to share about the journey. And it feels pretty cool to be at that place. I feel like I only maybe turned the corner on that a couple of years ago. To again, get my feet under me and have a sense of this. And I think I've been really blessed to have had a variety of experience in ministry too that have given me some good grounding for what this whole business is about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I have to thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate your support and wisdom in our relationship. And you know, you do have a lot of experience and knowledge and love for ministry and living, and I'm excited to hear about the changes coming up and how the next year goes.
Yeah. Well, and I would share with you, Cory, that part of it too is I also feel like I have a lot of passion for mentoring because I'm also aware after 13 years of how lonely and hard this job can be. And I think there have been times in my ministry when I wished I had more support and more people that I could call on. And so that's also kind of a real passion of mine, is wanting to connect people more, and specifically connect ministers more, because this job can be so isolating. And it's like I was talking earlier about, like, it's hard we have to get different feedback streams because we can't always depend on our congregation. And I think we have to sometimes, we don't even, we don't have anybody, we don't have any colleagues often in our churches. We're the sole person who's kind of on the payroll. And it's really important to have other people where you can talk through issues that are coming up and who can be a mirror for you and a sounding board. So it's definitely another mission of mine, I think, within the denomination, is to help improve the way in which we're supporting each other and connecting to each other, because I've survived it, but there are certainly some times in my life when I wished it had been different, and I want to help that be different for other people.
That's great. It's really comforting to hear that, because I think, just hearing from people in our denomination over the last few years, it sounds like there used to be more of a network of ministers back in the day. Like, they had regional pastors and
right,
healthy kind of connections, and
right.
Yeah, so it's nice that we have this. Definitely, I feel wonderful having that support. But yeah, the more we can do, for each other and in this community, and I'm here for you too. I may be your mentee, but I want to.
No, it'll be a mutual. Well, and that's another, I can't tell you exactly where Swedenborg does it, but the Hells thrive on isolation. Like, that's definitely one of the ways in which they do their work. So the more we can combat isolation, the more we are protected from that hellish influence. So.
We've mentioned hell and heaven a few times in this conversation.
We have, yeah.
Just in case someone new has, stepped into this world, what's your thought about, what makes hell? What is it? Everyone who, obviously, based on what we already said, it's not. But is it everyone who doesn't agree with us, or what's hell to you?
So I don't necessarily. I'm not gonna get into the physics of hell. I don't exactly know how it's all working out. I think for me, but I know it. It's like I know it when I see it, kind of. Like that quote about pornography. Like, I know it when I see it. I can't tell you what it is, but I know it when I see it. I know it when I see hell. Like, I know it when I'm feeling hell. Like, it's everything that would attack the good. You know, it's all the influences. It's all of the voices in our heads. It's all of the destructive impulses that take over our bodies and our voices and our activity. You know, it's all of the ways in which we are inspired to do ill things to one another and to ourselves. And where that comes from, you know, I mean, maybe it is all of the people who have died, who have not chosen heaven, and they're all out there in the spiritual world, and they're influencing us. Like, I mean, I think what Swedenborg describes in some ways is the most, it makes more sense than a lot of other ways of describing hell. But in some ways, none of that is as important as the feeling and the experience of hell. So I feel like it's real. I think evil is real, like the impulse to do harm and to be totally guided by our most selfish instincts. I think that's real. And I actually feel very liberated being able to believe that hell is real. I think sometimes some of the religious sentiment where it's like, God is love and everything is love and it's all good, and, you know, hell is just like let's just not even like pay attention to that. Sometimes that is actually, I felt very challenging to me, because then it's like, well, if I'm stuck in hell and if I'm dealing with all of these hellish thoughts, and then what's wrong with me? You know, if everything's supposed to be love, then I must be doing something wrong if I'm experiencing all of these negative things. And so I find to acknowledge that there is a hell and that sometimes it is seeking to attack us, to me, makes me make more sense of my experience of life. And then to recognize that is a real thing, and yet never actually as lasting and powerful and real as love and as God, gives me a framework to approach everything. Because then when I am attacked by the hells, whether that's thinking all of these negative thoughts, whether that's being in a really damaging or painful or toxic environment, whatever that is, I can know that God is seeking to call me out and draw me out of that, and start to look for what that, where the lifeboat is, or, where the next thing is that's going to help me to move out of that. And not only move out of it, but then probably use what I have learned to help others get out too. I don't know. That's probably a pretty practical answer, but yeah.
I think that's today. Right on.
Wow. Yeah, the practicality of it, I think, is really the heart of why Swedenborg would even want to write about it, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting. As I mentioned, we're going through heaven and hell, and although he's describing all these metaphysical things, I find them very applicable to reflecting on my own life and how to uplift other people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, as you were saying, if you know that there are hellish influences, and sometimes we receive our kind of hellish orientations without really reflecting on them or wanting to, and we just own it. We just think, well, this is me, I do this thing, I'm about this. And often we get defensive, and what I find beautiful about Swedenborg's theology, and of course he would say he bases his theology from biblical scripture and his visions of the afterlife, but it sheds light on, okay, I can look at the things that I'm receiving as being receptions, and stop owning as much of my hellishness, and just more, that kind of third party look allows me to dismiss it a little bit more readily, and also to say, this is great, this part of what's happening within and without, and let me accept it as a gift, and not be so egotistical or selfish about that too. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Definitely one of the parts of our theology that I think is most in line with like the Buddhist tradition, like non-attachment, being able to watch our thoughts come in and out and not like grab onto them and make them ours. There's a lot of power in that, to be able to be the observer of that stuff. And you're right. I think we get so defensive when we mess up or whatever, and if we can just say, "Wow, that was." I'm gonna say I'm sorry, and I'm gonna forgive, and I'm gonna move on. I mean, that's really what Jesus is telling us. That's why forgiveness is so central. We have to see that this stuff is real, and then keep grabbing on to that lifeboat and trying to seek the good.
Well, how wonderful. Well, Reverend Cole, I have to thank you for your sharing this evening, your deep insights, and your wisdom and loving affection. It's been quite the gift to us. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's been fun to talk to you, Cory.
Oh, great. Good to hear. And we will have you on again pretty soon if you'll let us. And I know those of you in the Chatsy they've shared a lot of different insights of inspirations from what you've said, and I'll share those with you.
And that would be great.
I have to thank them as well. Great, awesome. Thanks again so much, Reverend Sage. Is there anything you'd like to say in parting?
This has been really fun. I didn't fall asleep at all, and I feel all energized now. It's going to take me a while to go to bed. It's been really fun to talk to you, and I can almost feel all of the people who are listening right now, even though I'm not even looking at a computer, so I don't know who's chatting, but I can feel the presence of other people, and this is definitely one of those ways in which we are trying to seek the spiritual world in our technology. It's really cool. We can just somehow be connected even though we're in all of the diverse parts of the globe. So thank you for the invitation. I do hope to come back again.
Oh, splendid. Thanks again, and thank you all. Go forth knowing you are quite loved.